watching DD India and I'm Preeti presenting this special program, the Mamallapuram Summit. And in the next 2 hours, we'll talk about the relationship between India and China. Chinese President Xi Jinping will reach Chennai in the afternoon. And from there, he will head for Mamallapuram to take part in the second informal summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during which they're expected to hold comprehensive talks on a host of issues concerning the bilateral relationship, and they will exchange views on regional and international issues. The first meeting was in Wuhan in China in 2018. A red carpet welcome awaits President Xi when he arrives in Mamallapuram today evening. All-out efforts have been made to deck up the coastal town of Mamallapuram, which had strong historical linkages with China's Fujian province. Prime Minister Modi will take the visiting dignitary to 3 iconic monuments of Mamallapuram, that is Arjuna's penance, Panchrathas and also the Shore Temple. Then the two leaders will witness a cultural program at the temple complex. In the program today, we will gauge how important is this second informal summit between the two countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has already arrived to attend the second informal meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in the coastal town of Mamallapuram, which is about 50 kilometers from Chennai of Tamil Nadu. Prime Minister was accorded a warm reception at Mamallapuram by state senior ministers, including D. Jayakumar and his officials. He later left by road to the nearby hotel where he would be staying. He wished the summit will further strengthen ties between India and China. All-out efforts have been made to decorate and deck the town of Mamallapuram. And it will not be an exaggeration to say that India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and China under President Xi have introduced the concept of informal summits into diplomatic parlance. We trace the journey from Wuhan to Mamallapuram. Chinese President Xi Jinping is arriving in India today for the second informal summit.
27th April 2018. Day 1 of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 2-day informal Wuhan summit ending with this tune that says it all. In a picture-perfect moment, China saying, "Ye Vada Raha." A promise made to walk side by side with India. And keeping the promise, President Xi will touch down in Chennai for the Mamallapuram summit on Friday. The stage is all set for a grand welcome. The two leaders will walk the talk at historic sites including the Shore Temple, Arjuna's penance and the Panchrathas. On Saturday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will host President Xi for one-on-one as well as delegation-level talks at the Fisherman's Cove in Chennai. Rewinding to Wuhan, the warmth and camaraderie both leaders share was visible as they took a long walk by the iconic East Lake. In a key outcome, the two leaders agreed to issue strategic guidance to their militaries to strengthen communications and to build trust and understanding.
It's an opportune time that the two leaders are meeting, and I do hope that the understanding reached between the two leaders at the end of the 2-day summit will provide some stability and predictability to the bilateral relations.
After the walk the talk followed a Nao Pe Charcha. The two leaders took a boat ride on a traditional Chinese wooden boat sporting a pagoda. This was reminiscent of Prime Minister Modi's unique style of hospitality. In 2014, he hosted President Xi in Ahmedabad along the Sabarmati waterfront, creating an informal atmosphere that allows candid exchange of thoughts and ideas. A traditional tea ceremony awaited the leaders on the lake side. Prime Minister Modi shared lighter moments with President Xi, perhaps recalling the days when he was a young boy and he sold tea at a railway station, Vadnagar. The Chai Pe Charcha continued as the two leaders sat down over a cup of tea. Prime Minister Modi was seen poring over a document deep in conversation with President Xi. The leaders of the two Asian giants held 6 meetings in 24 hours, discussing trade, tourism, people-to-people connect, and other regional and global issues, agreeing to strengthen mutual relations in days to come. That multiple aspects of bilateral trade were discussed over the 2 days became evident with India and China identifying terrorism as a major global problem. Within 5 weeks of the Wuhan summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping met in Qingdao, ahead of the SCO summit. This was their 14th meeting in a short span of 4 years. The two leaders took forward the agenda set in the informal summit. Both countries inked 2 agreements after the bilaterals. The first agreement enables the Chinese side to provide hydrological data about the Brahmaputra River in flood season. It also enables the Chinese side to provide hydrological data if water levels exceed mutually agreed levels during non-flood season. The second agreement relates to facilitation of export of rice from India to China. In 2018, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi also met during the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, as well as on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Buenos Aires. In 2019, the two leaders met during the SCO summit in Bishkek and on the sidelines of the Osaka G20 summit. The power-packed 2 days at Mamallapuram will be their 3rd meeting this year. The 21st century is often described as Asia's century, and India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as well as China by President Xi Jinping, are partnering to ensure this becomes a reality. Bureau Report, DD News.
And our correspondent Amritpal Singh takes a look at the venue of the informal summit, Mamallapuram.
President Xi of China arrives here in Mamallapuram, some 50 kilometers off Chennai on the eastern coast of India. He will be greeted by Prime Minister Modi here at the Krishna's Ball, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a monument dating back from the 7th century AD, from the times of the Pallav dynasty, which has had very close cultural and trade relations with China, especially the Fujian province. In fact, it was from here that prince turned monk of the Pallav dynasty went to China and took Zen Buddhism here from Mamallapuram to China. So the idea is that the two leaders, when they talk in a setting which builds on this cultural historical connect, which happens in a more informal setting. The second informal summit level meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi happens here in this cultural setting, in a soft setting, so that when the two leaders sit at the Fisherman's Cove in Mamallapuram and engage with each other, first one-on-one on Saturday and later followed by delegation level talks, they can approach issues which are thorny issues, which are difficult issues, be it issues of trade, defense, security cooperation, terror, increasing people-to-people contacts, updating the CBMs or the confidence-building measures along the line of control, resolving the border issue, which has been going on for a very, very long time. The special representatives have been appointed. So the idea is to pick up the threads from the first informal summit, which happened in Wuhan in China, and then use Mamallapuram to pick up the threads from there and build on the bonhomie and the chemistry that we saw between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi to take the relationship to newer and greater heights. With cameraman S. Shankar, Amritpal Singh, DD News, Mamallapuram.
All right, our correspondent Amritpal Singh joins us from Mamallapuram. Amrit, the Chinese president will reach Chennai in another, say, 1 hour from now, and he will reach Mamallapuram in the evening. Tell us, is the stage all set?
That's right, the stage is all set. As you said, in a little while from now, at about 2 o'clock, President Xi Jinping will land at the Chennai airport. From there, he'll go to the place where he's staying in Chennai, a hotel in Chennai. From there, he comes by road to Mamallapuram, where Prime Minister Modi will be greeting him at the Krishna's Ball. Prime Minister Modi arrived here in Mahabalipuram a little while back. The stage is all set. There have been cultural performances lined up around the route, which is about 50-55 kilometers, kilometer-long route from Chennai. The President Xi will come by the road. There will be cultural performances. Over 350 cultural performances have been lined up, showcasing the culture of Tamil Nadu, and also little children out would be lined up to see President Xi for themselves. So it will really be a visual treat. The city of Mahabalipuram, or Mallapuram as it's called.
All right, I think we've lost contact there with Amritpal Singh. We'll try getting back to him again to get more on the preparations which have been put in place for the two dignitaries when they meet today evening. Up next, we'll have a discussion with a special guest in the studio, and to gauge and to measure how important this visit is for both the countries. We welcome former Ambassador Mr. Vishnu Prakash, and he's joining us in the studio. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this afternoon. Our correspondent was talking about the setup in Mamallapuram, and in the evening both the leaders will be there. Now this will be for the second time the two leaders are meeting for an informal summit. Let's first talk about how important are informal summits, because now onwards there is a change in perception. Earlier it used to be the higher the level of the meeting, and the higher would be the takeaways. The maximum would be the takeaways. So when we talk of India and China in particular, they started the dialogue at Foreign Secretary level in 1988, and then they elevated it to empowered special representatives, interaction in 2003, and now we have the informal summits. It happened in 2018 when Prime Minister attended the summit in Wuhan, and now we have the Chinese President here in India. How do you measure the potential and the caliber of such informal summits?
I think you have hit the nail in the head. I have served in China. I have sat in numerous meetings at summit level with between India and China. Mm-hmm. The interaction with Chinese used to be very, very choreographed. Each side would have their agenda, each side would read out their statements, there was very little discussion, and you would move on. Now, China is very used to that. For the first time, at the behest of Prime Minister, our Prime Minister,
yes,
China agreed to the informal summit. I mean, first point that I would like to make is that, as far as I know, India is the only country with which China has this process of format of informal summit. Now, what happens in an informal summit? What did we see in Wuhan? The two leaders had 4 one-on-one interactions, 2 delegation level talks spread over 8 hours. No agenda, no fixed agenda, no expectations, no pressure of deliverables. They could have a freewheeling chat on a one-on-one basis. Now, this is very rare for the Chinese leaders to do. And certainly when you have 2 strong leaders, 2 influential leaders, 2 leaders who have such a broad worldview and also such a deep understanding of their history, civilization and so on, it makes a difference for them to have this kind of a chat. So the idea was, and it was successfully implemented, was to bridge the perception gap, build trust between each other, help to understand each other's perspectives. That is the most important thing, Preeti, when we come to India-China relations, because unfortunately, though we have a 4,000 kilometer long border, though we have been interacting with each other civilizationally for 2,000 years, there is a trust gap, there is a perception gap, there is an information gap. And the name of the game is to try to bridge that, to enhance understanding, and that is what was sought in Wuhan, and the continuum of that we find now in Mahabalipuram.
All right, you're talking of how we'll find the continuation of the Wuhan spirit, as the term was coined, to Mamallapuram. But then we'll talk of the venue and the timing of
Sure.
the summit. After the talk of informal aspect of the summit, let's talk of the timing. Now, the
Sure.
two leaders meet when you're talking of the trust deficit between both the countries. Added to that, the venue, for that matter, Tamil Nadu, as we told our viewers, has historic connections with China and also earlier links to Buddhism and maritime trade also between the two countries that had the Tamil Nadu link to them. When we talk of the timing and the venue, are that well placed for both the countries when they meet today? Both the leaders?
Timing cannot be better for the simple reason, fortuitously or otherwise, we are passing through a difficult patch
Yes.
in the relationship.
Right.
If I may reflect on the relationship, it's a difficult relationship. And I am kind of understating it when I say it's a difficult relationship, because when it comes to India's core interests, China has not been appreciative of India's core interests. In fact, ever since Wuhan, for a variety of reasons, their positions have in fact hardened. With China, we have an adversarial relationship. Our challenge is, and it's a mutual challenge because China also does not want conflict. Our challenge is to prevent it from becoming inimical. We are a friend me, as they said, half friend, half
yes.
enemy. Our effort is to move towards friendship. China's hopefully is also, and prevent it from turning inimical. So yes, it has come not a day too soon, and symbolism is very, very important in diplomacy. What are we trying to symbolize by having it in Mamallapuram? I frankly cannot pronounce the other name, the new name, so that I leave to you.
Right.
Now, as you very rightly alluded to, we have historical linkages between the Pallava dynasty and China's Fujian province. It depicts the fact that India has always been a maritime power. China has not been a maritime power, but India has been. And for 2000 years, India's sailors, merchants, shippers spread all across to east, west and south. So it signifies or underlines the historical linkages. Unsaid is that we want to reinforce those linkages and in the modern period also kind of take them forward. And I would say that again, that despite the differences, and the differences are not going to go away because these are geostrategic differences. The name of the game is to talk more and try to narrow the perception gap.
All right, we'll take this thought forward, sir, but at present I'm again joined in by our correspondent Amrit Pal, and he's joining us from Mamallapuram. Amrit, we were talking about the preparations which have been put in place for the welcome of the Chinese president. Please continue.
Yeah, I was telling you the city is decked up. The Prime Minister receives the visiting dignitary here at 5 in the evening. Takes him around to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, starting from the point of the ball of the Krishna's ball of butterball, and then it's a small walk towards Arjuna's penance. These are old monuments, 7th century AD monuments, now classified as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Then he takes them to what is called the Panch Rath, or the 5 chariots. And then the two leaders go down to Shore Temple, where a huge cultural program is organized. A cultural evening is organized. There will be dances. The two leaders will sit in a very informal setting and talk to each other. And then Prime Minister Modi hosts a dinner for President Xi, where again they spend about 45 minutes to 1 hour at the dinner. So a total of about say 3.5 hours today they spent this evening together. That will sort of lend set the mood for tomorrow's talks, which are both, though it's being dubbed as the second informal talks, but yes, there is an element of delegation level talks which have been added, but the two leaders will also be having one-on-one talks without aides, without the diplomats to assist them, where, as Ambassador Prakash was saying, the idea is, the format is that it has to be, that it's designed to be freewheeling, where the two leaders can put their political weight behind and negotiate what may become difficult difficult or seemingly intractable issues like what they did at Wuhan when they said that yes, they will lend strategic guidance to their own militaries. The idea was to send a message across to the militaries that a Doklam kind of situation should be avoided, though the militaries are paid to, they are employed to protect borders, but they should not come. It should not become an eyeball to eyeball where, and if it does, that there should be mechanisms in place where they can retreat and diffuse the situation, and those protocols and CBMs are already in place, and we've seen that it's we don't hear those sort of transgressions and incursions happening. Though let me tell you, they do happen because on the LAC or the line of actual control or that border, because that border is not very clear. Indians have a different perception of the border, the Chinese have a different perception, and that's why there is a SR level or interlocutor level mechanism in place to resolve it. But till that happens and the finality happens on them, the armies will stand, both the PLA and the Indian Army will stand there to guard their borders. Now, but it doesn't find mention in the media, it doesn't, it's not blown out of proportion, basically because they've strengthened those mechanisms to diffuse such kind of a situation, that even if armies come face to face. So I think what the two leaders now in this informal setting would be trying to do tomorrow is how to build them further, the CBMs, how to upgrade those CBMs and protocols, which may not be announced this time but agreed upon, and later once the SR level talks happen next month, they could be announced then. So it leaves a scope for a forward movement in the whole, over the whole gamut of issues. Though, as Ambassador Prakash was saying, these are difficult issues, and countries always act in self-interest. A walk by the seaside is not going to change the reality, but the walk by the seaside does set the mood for a little amount of give and take. And if that fits in the matrix of the nation's interest, yes, leaders putting their political weight behind can break impasse, as we've seen in world history.
All right, the cultural aspect of the relationship would be the highlight today, and both the leaders sit for business talks tomorrow. Amrit, discussions on overarching issues of bilateral, regional and global importance, and to exchange views on deepening India-China closer development partnership is what both the leaders will deliberate upon. Let's talk about the areas of cooperation, or the specific areas which could be taken up.
Well, let me put a disclaimer before I answer that question, that the foreign offices of both countries haven't put out any areas, but broadly speaking, the areas that exist between the two countries and are more likely to figure in the talks tomorrow, both on one-on-one talks, in the one-on-one talks, and also the delegation level talks, defense and security ties, the issue of trade, how to scale that up and increase the ambit of trade. India would want greater market access to that, to areas of trade that India wishes to expand in China, especially trying to reduce the trade deficit, which is a yawning deficit of $70 billion, and see how that can be, how a roadmap can be worked out to see that can be brought to a more manageable, a more balanced trade, which is less bad than what it is presently. Right. People to people connect, improving that, because that leads to building of trust, that leads to increased trade ties. Right now, most of your trade that happens is, they send you finished products mostly, and you send them raw materials. So if you can change the very nature of that, and people to people contact, building on that 70 years of diplomatic ties that we celebrate next year. So these would be the areas. Terror is another area that is going to figure majorly, and if the Chinese want to bring up any issue, the Indian side would present their picture on that. When I say that, if the Chinese do bring up Kashmir, the Indian side would put its perspective, share its perspective on that, what was the rationale behind the abrogation of 370, and how it doesn't impinge on any other country's interests.
All right, Amrit, thank you so much for joining us. As of now, we'll come back to you again to talk more. Thank you for joining us. All right, we'll go back to our guest in the studio. We're joined in by Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, and we're talking about how important is this visit for both the countries. So we had a detailed input on how important would be informal summits for both the countries. Now our correspondent also weighed that for us, and you also measured that for us. But then, are we saying that is it like one step forward and a step backward movement? Because we were talking of the timing, we were talking of the venue, lot of points there to, you know, lot of commonalities there between the two countries, and we are building up on that. But at the end of the day, we're talking when we'll talk about the takeaways, when we'll talk about what eventually, what ended up eventually is what is the crux of the meeting. Now, blocking India's membership at the NST, for that matter, or we've seen how very vocally China has talked of the Kashmir issue recently. So, put all these together, this optimism, this positivity, that can be taken forward as well?
Let me put it in perspective for you and our viewers,
Yes.
and for us both. Today there is the power balance between India and China has become asymmetric. Chinese GDP is 5 times India's GDP. Chinese defense budget is 4 times India's defense budget. When I was posted in China, they used to talk of the peaceful rise of China. That was a mantra. And talk about how the peaceful rise of China is good for the world.
Capitalist expansion is what you're talking of.
Peaceful rise of China was a mantra, basically saying that, look, you know, we are not threatening anybody. We are the engine of growth. We are a responsible player in the Committee of Nations, etc., etc. You know, we are not the dragon which breathes fire. I mean, the symbolic. 2008 was in a way a cutoff point where China got into the bigger league, and suddenly they started talking of G2. Suddenly started talking of G2.
Okay.
Now G2 was USA and China.
And China, right.
So from the developing country status, they leapfrogged into the big power status, not of their own choosing, but the world started saying that. And that mantra of peaceful rise was quietly buried. And China started talking about its rightful place in the world.
In the world.
Now, with growing economy, growing military power, growing ambition, came growing aggression. And China today, the challenge for not just India but the world over is that China wants to have a China-centric regional and international order. That is the whole thing. Because when you are a $14 trillion economy, when you have the fastest growing navy in the world, when by 2022 you will have 3 aircraft carriers, you want to have a blue water navy. When you have a $3.5 trillion foreign exchange reserves, when you have $350 billion of trade surplus with USA and 60 billion with India, etc., etc., you develop ambitions. Now, if it's a democratic country, you have a different orientation. But China is not a democratic country. It's not a market economy. So that is the challenge, not just for India, but for the region and beyond. And when you talk of India, it's very right that you refer to the core issues, which are boundary issues, membership of the NSG, membership of the UN Security Council, terrorism, Pakistan, Kashmir. Frankly, there has been no give on the part of China. In fact, China is using Pakistan as the cat's paw to give pinpricks to India, to impose 1,000 cuts, as they try to say, to keep India in check. And not now, but China, see, look at Asia. Which is the other?
That is what we, would be the follow-up topic on this. You're talking of how China leapfrogged into the group
big
of big leaders. And we also know how India is rising in the present context. So does that also change the combination and permutations between the two countries?
that is precisely the issue.
Yes.
That is precisely the issue for China.
And China cannot leave India also, and a hand-in-hand approach is the need of the hour?
Well, that should be the need of the hour, but you see, till 1998, it's again important to put it in perspective. Till 1998, before we went nuclear, China had, in its frame of things, in its scheme of things, boxed India into the South Asian framework and wanted to keep India there, keep India busy in South Asia. That's it. As our economy started growing, as we went nuclear, as India's stock rose, as we started leveraging one relationship after the other, from in China's perspective, at one point in time, India was an irritant, a democracy, noisy democracy. Today, you have the potential of being a countervailing power. Potential.
Okay.
You're not yet there,
Potential,
but you have the potential. You have the demographic dividend, you have a flourishing democracy, you have a market economy, etc. So, it's very important from the, if I was the Chinese president, thank God I'm not, if I was a Chinese president, I would very much want to make sure that I would want to stem the rise of India.
Okay.
And that is the name of the game. Now, what should we be doing? This is precisely what we are doing, is to reach out to China, say, look, we can work together. And that is the effort. Now, whether China would play ball or not, that's $1 million question.
Okay, we should work together is how you put the main concern between the two countries. Let's talk of the areas of collaboration.
Sure.
Our correspondent gave a broad outline of the areas, though nothing has been put in by the foreign ministers of both the countries. So, as the formal visit announcement says, I'll quote it, it says discussions on overarching issues of bilateral, regional and global importance, and to exchange views on deepening India-China closer development partnership. Would that mean any topic under the sun, or specific irritants, specific pointers, specific issues that have to be taken?
I have tried to list out some of the topics. Amrit had mentioned them, and I think he was spot on as far as I am concerned in his assessment, but let me build on that.
Right.
You know, there are the hard issues on the one hand which have to be discussed, and these would include the boundary issue, terrorism, Pakistan and trade.
Okay.
And then there are the international issues which will include certainly climate change and India-China plus, you mentioned that, and there we are talking about what we can do together in Afghanistan, what we can do together in Africa, that's another possibility. And then there are the comparatively softer issues, people-to-people relations, cultural relations, sporting links, youth links, and also a celebration of the, or befittingly marking the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations, which is next year.
Okay.
So I think it will be a mix of all. I would think that we will see movement on the softer issues, which is very welcome, because China has 110 million people who travel abroad. A very small fraction come to India.
Sir, we'll continue this thought forward, but at present we're joined in by our correspondent Philip Matthews, who's joining us from the Chennai airport, where Chinese President Xi Jinping will arrive in some while from now. Philip, let us know what preparations have been put in place. I see a very colorful and a vibrant background. Let us know what time is the Chinese President expected? Philip, if I'm audible to you, let us know what preparations have been put in place. What time is the Chinese President expected? I think we've not been able to establish contact there with Philip Matthews. We'll try getting back to him again. He is at the Chennai airport, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected in some while from now, and we see a very colorful background, and preparations have been put in place, and as we told you, a red carpet welcome awaits the Chinese President both at the Chennai airport and also at Mamallapuram, and a number of programs have been put in place for the two leaders. It will more or less be a cultural outing for the Chinese president today evening, when the Prime Minister takes him through different important venues, different important aspects in Mamallapuram. Also, we've told you how Prime Minister has already reached Chennai, and he will be present to receive the Chinese president at Mamallapuram. We were discussing the visit of the Chinese president with our guest in the studio, and as we speak we can see the cultural performances there in Chennai ahead of President Xi Jinping's arrival. As the visiting dignitary will reach Chennai airport, he will be arriving at Mamallapuram in the evening today, and the Prime Minister will give him a guided tour of 3 monuments in Mamallapuram: Arjuna's Penance and Krishna's Butterball, and also the 2 dignitaries will visit Panchraths and the Shore Temple. Also, a cultural performance is lined up at the Shore Temple in Mamallapuram, and the Chinese president will be given a drive down from the Chennai airport to Mamallapuram, and the centre and the state governments have lined up a number of cultural performances giving a glimpse of the rich culture the Prime Minister will offer to the visiting dignitary there. Going back to our correspondent Philip Matthews, who's present at the Chennai airport. Philip, behind you I can see colorful flags, and a very vibrant visual is what you give to us. Let us know what preparations have been put in place and what time is the Chinese president expected?
Well, Preeti, I can just show you. In fact, many of these folk artists are just going through their practice session right now. There you can see percussion instruments, drums, a variety of other instruments being played, and all of this is basically a practice session awaiting the arrival of the Chinese president. So clearly there's a great deal of excitement here. Most of these are folk artists from the interior parts of Tamil Nadu who have gathered here, who have undergone an intense period of training over the last 1 week or so, and they are now here to welcome the Chinese dignitary and give him a taste of Tamil Nadu's traditional art forms.
All right, these people will give a taste of Tamil Nadu's traditional art forms. Philip, you must have had a word with the participants here. Let us know more about the enthusiasm, about the excitement of hosting a high-profile visitor there, in Chennai. Philip?
Well, absolutely. In fact, there's a great deal of excitement right across the board in Chennai, because don't forget, Chennai has historical ties with the Chinese mainland. In fact, one of the reasons that Mamallapuram was chosen for this summit, historic informal summit, was because it was felt that the ties between Mamallapuram and China go back a long way. In fact, to as far back as the 8th century during Pallava rule. That was when the ties between both Tamil Nadu and the Chinese mainland actually developed. So clearly the Chinese are also keenly aware of it, and they were also very keen that the summit be held in Mamallapuram. In fact, the last time a high-ranking Chinese dignitary visited Chennai was in 1956, when the then Premier Chow En-lai made a visit to Chennai, and in fact he even visited the Shore Temple in Mamallapuram on that occasion. So clearly this is a visit that has historic overtones, and there's no doubt whatsoever that the mood here is quite upbeat. In fact, right across the political spectrum, whether it's the opposition or the ruling party or most of the other parties, all of them have welcomed the fact that that this important international meeting is actually taking place here just close to Chennai in the historic seaside town of Mamallapuram.
All right, Philip, it will be a very brief stopover for the Chinese president, as in when he arrives in Chennai, he will be driven down to Mamallapuram. So, we've also told our viewers that the state and the central governments have there lined up a number of cultural performances to give a glimpse of the rich cultural heritage and also the legacy. Let us know more about what all has been put in place.
Well, essentially the Chinese president will be motoring down to Mamallapuram. He will first, of course, drop in at his hotel in the city. Thereafter, of course, he will undertake a road journey to Mamallapuram. Along the route, at around 100 odd locations, we will find school children will be there waving banners. There will be cultural performances en route as well. So in fact, as many as 5,000 students have been pressed into service to ensure that the visiting dignitary is given a glimpse of not just Tamil Nadu's traditional art and forms, but also the youthful talent that Tamil Nadu has. And all of that will be on evidence along the route. He will be traveling along the East Coast Road to Mamallapuram, where of course he will be received by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And thereafter they will be visiting 3 historic monuments, the Arjuna Penance, the 5 Rathas, and of course eventually ending up at the Shore Temple, where artists from the Kalakshetra Academy will be putting on a dance performance at the seaside by the Bay of Bengal. And it will be a very scenic display given the backdrop of the Bay of Bengal. So it's something that both leaders will sit down and watch before, of course, they adjourn for dinner. And thereafter, of course, tomorrow there will be again a one-on-one session between the Prime Minister and the visiting President before they hold delegation-level talks, and thereafter a break for lunch. So that essentially is the program of the visiting dignitary. It is essentially a 24-hour visit, but it's a visit that's packed with a number of cultural as well as personal interactive sessions.
All right, Philip, thank you so much for joining us. As of now, we'll come back to you for more in the day that follows. As of now, thank you. That was our correspondent Philip Matthews telling us about the preparations which have been put in place ahead of President Xi's visit. The President of China is expected to arrive at Chennai International Airport in some while from now, and also from there he will be driven down to Mamallapuram, where he will meet Prime Minister and will have an informal summit. Yes, the informal summit begins today, and to talk more about it, we are joined in with a guest in the studio. We're joined in by Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, and we were talking about, sir, how for both the countries, both are equally important for each other. Let's continue this thought forward. And you were talking of the areas of cooperation. Our correspondent, as we saw, he put a broad outline of the issues, and you were also just naming. And when we were joined in by our correspondent, let's take that thought forward.
Yes. So I had attempted to list out the difficult issues, the softer issues, the difficult bilateral issues, softer issues, and some of the issues of which are regional or international, climate change, for example. Now we are the 2 largest countries in the world in terms of size. Although our per capita emissions are very little, the overall quantity of greenhouse gas emissions are huge. And in the case of India, because our per capita income is just $2,000, whereas the per capita income of the developed countries is $30,000 to $40,000, the greenhouse gas emissions are going to increase with the passage of time. So those are some of the challenges that we need to discuss.
Yes,
those are some of the challenges that we need to discuss. Climate change, cooperation in, as I mentioned, India, China plus, which could entail cooperation in Afghanistan, Africa, and so on. So these are some areas where we can discuss. In the past we have worked together on the issues of climate change. We have worked together in WTO issues, but then China has at times its own agenda, and but as I said, there are areas in which we can work together, and there are areas where we can build upon. There are areas where we can narrow differences, but the important thing is for both sides, it takes 2 to tango, as they say, and it's very important for both sides to have a similar outlook and desire to work together.
All right, so you're talking of how this trust deficit has to be changed into cooperation dividend, as we may call it. All right, let's talk of the issue. You've talked of a number of issues. Connectivity between could be a very important issue between the two countries. Now, we have seen how Delhi has reservations on the Belt and Road Initiative. So, concerns have to be accommodated?
Very much, very much. You see, how can a relationship be built when you are sensitive to each other's concerns? If I were to say that, look, Mr. China, I mean, these are my concerns, I'll only pursue them, it will not work. Similarly, from the other side, it will not work. Now, Belt and Road Initiative is something which impacts adversely on India's unity and integrity.
Yes.
It passes through the Indian territory.
Right.
How on earth can we accept that? So, this is under the territory is under the illegal occupation of China and Pakistan. And we have made it very clear that we have other issues also on the Belt and Road Initiative which the world is recognizing because it's not transparent. And as somebody said, it is made for China, by China, of China. So, there are issues. And as similarly on the issue of terrorism, look at that. There is a globally recognized terrorist whose activities are as clear as daylight. The world is saying, let the UN designate him as a UN designated global terrorist.
And that has been blocked by China time and again.
On very specious grounds puts a hold on it for 10 years. So those are the kind of challenges that we face.
All right, so we'll also take this thought forward, but at present our correspondent Philip Matthews joining us from Chennai International Airport. Philip, as we talk, we are showing very vibrant visuals to our viewers, and a cultural performance is what awaits the Chinese president at the airport. Philip, let us know more.
Well, as I said, there are many different folk art forms that are on display here at the airport. All of them representing different aspects of Tamil Nadu, and of course includes Tamil Nadu's famous Bharatanatyam dance, which will be on show when the visiting Chinese president arrives here in a short while from now. In fact, all these art forms, as I mentioned, have long tradition in Tamil Nadu. Many of them originated here, and they've had related to the with the history and culture of this region. So all of them are being put on display, basically to give the visiting Chinese dignitary an idea about the ancientness of Tamil culture, and of course to emphasize the links between the civilizations of China and India.
All right, Philip. Also, we tell our viewers that the president will be driven down to Mamallapuram, and where he will be received by the Prime Minister there. Let's talk about the program there in Mamallapuram. Also, the president will be given a guided tour of Arjuna's Penance and Butterball Rock. Also, he will be taken to Panchrats and also the Shore Temple. For the benefit of our viewers, tell us the high points, the important points that would, though we will show the visuals to our viewers. So what important points would be there to keep in mind when the president visits these monuments?
Well, as I mentioned, Mamallapuram has a historic connect with the Chinese, because
let us know more about the monuments also which the Chinese president will be visiting.
Yes, and in fact, as I said, given that Mamallapuram has had a historic connect with the Chinese, with the Chinese side, that is something that was clearly a factor in selecting Mamallapuram as the venue for the second informal India-China summit. And the three monuments we're talking about is one, of course, is Arjuna's Penance, where you have basically where you have Arjuna basically in the posture standing on the leg. Then you have the five rathas, or the five chariots, as they're called. All of these are sculptures that were carved out during the Pallav rule in the 8th century, and they're of course a must-see on the itinerary of every tourist to Chennai and to Mamallapuram. So these are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and it's a site that is on the World Global Tourist Map. So these are areas that have a long tradition of showcasing Tamil culture and heritage. And as I said, these were carved out during Pallava rule during the 8th century, and that is something that the Prime Minister will probably be seeking to emphasize when he takes the visiting Chinese President around on a tour of these areas.
All right, Philip, you there in Chennai now. The informal summit is the second meeting between both the leaders. The Prime Minister met the Chinese President in Wuhan last year. When we talk of the expectations from the visit, the informal setting of the summit between the two leaders, what are you gauging there in Chennai of the expectations from both the leaders?
Well, what we are hearing from sources is officially is that this being an informal summit, of course, no MOUs or agreements are to be signed. So therefore, essentially it will be all about improving relations between the two sides. Of course, the border issue is likely to come up for discussion. Trade ties, of course, India and China share a pretty vibrant trade relationship, although that relationship is basically right now weighed in China's favor. Then, of course, you have the question of strengthening the regional cooperation. China has in recent years been aggressively expanding its ties in the region. So clearly, that will be one area of focus. Terrorism, of course, is a key area of concern, a global concern these days. That's also likely to figure on the agenda. So clearly, all of these is likely to figure on the agenda. What we have been told by sources in the MEA is that the issue of Kashmir will not figure unless and until the Chinese side bring it up. If they do, then of course the Prime Minister will clarify and explain India's position on the issue.
All right, Philip. So those were about the expectations. That was about the expectations from the visit. Now, also, let's talk in detail about the program ahead, which is planned today. Tomorrow, though, the leaders will sit for a business meeting and will have a one-on-one meeting and delegation level talks. But then today, more or less, the focus of the day would be culture.
Yes, indeed. In fact, it's typical of informal summits. In fact, there will be a mix of both business and culture. And of course, the business will not be in a structured form. It will be in terms of the nature of formal meetings between the two leaders. And only their interpreters will be present. But apart from that, there will of course be delegation level tomorrow. But by and large, the idea is to keep it as informal as possible to allow the two leaders strike a rapport with each other and to take the India-China partnership forward. We've had hiccups in this partnership before, and the idea is clearly to ensure that the road ahead is smoothened out so that whatever issues there are in the relationship can gradually be removed.
All right, Philip, let's talk more about for our viewers who are joining us late. Let us tell you these are the visuals we're getting for you from Chennai Airport. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected in a short while from now, and from there he will be driven down to Mamallapuram, where he will be received by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And our correspondent,
I can tell you, Preeti, that the Chinese President's plane has just landed at the airport. In fact, you might be getting visuals of it at the moment.
All right.
In fact, he should be deplaning in a few minutes from now.
Yes, our correspondent Philip Matthews update us that the plane carrying the Chinese president has landed, and in a while from now he will reboard the plane. Philip, for the benefit of our viewers, let's talk about the significance, the historical importance of Mamallapuram. This will be for the first time that a high-profile visitor will be there, and Mamallapuram will be hosting such a high-profile meeting. Let's talk more about the historical significance.
Well, as I said, given the fact that Prime Minister Modi is always been keen on taking his international engagements outside Delhi, this of course is very much in keeping with that. And in fact, we are told by sources that Mamallapuram was first suggested by the Chinese side, and the Indian side, of course, the Prime Minister agreed to it, keeping in mind the historical connection between Mamallapuram and China. So that, as I said, we've had ties between these two regions since the 8th century, and it's ties that have been essentially forged during the Pallava rule, during the rule of the Pallava kings, which is seen as one of the golden ages in Tamil Nadu. and in the history of this region.
All right, Philip. Also, let's talk more about when we talk of the setup there at the airport. It could not have been a better welcome for the Chinese president. Look at the weather there, a pleasant weather, and when he deboards the plane, a vibrant atmosphere there. We see a beautiful cultural, we see beautiful cultural performances there, right ahead of the Chinese president when he deboards the plane. Philip, let's talk about the enthusiasm, the excitement, not only here at the airport, but also in Chennai in general.
Well, absolutely, Preeti. In fact, there's been a great deal of enthusiasm, as I said, right across both the political spectrum as well as across the cross-section of society, because it's not every day that Chennai gets to host an international summit of this importance. Yes, it's an informal summit, but there's no doubt in anybody's mind that it's something that's crucial as far as making those China ties are concerned. And given the fact that there have been a number of hiccups in the relationship of late, there's no doubt that this is a relationship that will need to be nurtured. And of course, most Chennaites are extremely happy and proud to be a part of the occasion. In fact, most people we spoke to said we're extremely excited to welcome the visiting Chinese dignitary.
We'll be showing visuals
and, of course, one of the benefits is that of the visit is, of course, it has led to a number of roads and other facilities being spruced up ahead of the visiting Chinese president's visit. So that is also an add-on as far as the local citizens are concerned. But clearly, most of them looking forward to closer ties between this region and China. Don't forget, Tamil Nadu is a very thriving industrial base, and in fact, whether it's in automobiles or in other areas, whether it's machine tools or in other regions, we've had Tamil Nadu has a very, very developed industrial base, and that is something that will be really, that will be pushed during these talks, and the fact that Tamil Nadu is probably the right place for this kind of summit to take place. And I wouldn't be surprised, in fact, I'm told that a number of agreements may be signed between private companies in both China and in Tamil Nadu. Of course, that will happen beyond the venue of the summit. But we are told that this will lead to an increase in business ties between Tamil Nadu and China. So already we are seeing a renewed interest by Chinese trade and industry in investing in Tamil Nadu, and we can also expect a reciprocal interest from business circles in Tamil Nadu.
All right, Philip, at this point, I'll bring in the guest again, and you be with us. We are joined in by Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, and we were talking about different aspects of the relationship between the two nations. Sir, as we know, the Chinese president has landed, and any time from now, he will deboard the plane. We are talking of the informal setting of the summit. Cultural performances, a look into the heritage, a look into the cultural legacy of the two nations. Let's talk of how important is the body language, is the camaraderie between the two leaders when they meet. A lot is said, a lot is, a lot can be gauged even before MOUs are signed, or for that matter, any formal announcements are made. The very body language and the very camaraderie between the between any two leaders for that matter, give a sense of which way the meeting or the summit level meetings, otherwise meetings are heading to. We had Chai Pe Charcha between these two leaders. We had the Prime Minister when he hosted the Chinese President at the Sabarmati Ashram. We had a Jhula session also between them.
Jhule Pe Charcha.
Jhule Pe Charcha, all right, as you put it. Let's talk of this spirit, and that was this positivity, this camaraderie was evident in Wuhan also, and we termed it as Wuhan spirit. So that also plays a very important role whenever two leaders come together.
Well, it certainly makes a difference. The body language, as you put it, or the understanding, or the rapport between the two leaders makes a difference. Having said that, let me pause and kind of bring in the most important bit. The most important bit is the interest of a nation. Any diplomat, any leader would basically pursue national interests. So obviously national interests come first. Now that you have your national interests in place, there are areas in which your national interests can converge.
Right.
And there are options. a country may have option 1, 2, 3, 4, another country may have option 1, 2, 3. Now, if there is a rapport amongst the leaders,
Yes.
when there are choices, you would obviously want to go with a country where you have a good rapport with a leader. You'll be more receptive to his or her ideas. So that is the advantage of a rapport. But rapport doesn't mean that you will not pursue your national interests. You will be more open, more amenable. That is the difference that it makes. So that is how I see it.
All right, yes, that is the positivity and that is the optimism which you're talking of. All right, for our viewers who are joining us now, these are the visuals we're getting for you from Chennai International Airport. The plane of Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived. Chinese President Xi Jinping has landed at Chennai International Airport, and anytime he will deboard the plane. And we see a huge deployment of people there for astounding cultural performance that awaits the visiting dignitary. We have our correspondent Philip Matthews there. Philip, we were talking of the camaraderie, we were talking of the body language of the two leaders when they've met on earlier occasions also, and how that sets the tone of the meeting, which would be a very important aspect of these informal summits, the last one which happened in Wuhan, and this is how the two leaders are making an effort at showcasing the culture of their respective countries to the visiting dignitary. We saw that happen in Wuhan also, and today also the Chinese president will be given a guided tour by the Indian Prime Minister, Arjuna's Penance and Butterball Rock, Panchrats and Shore Temple. Let us know more about these monuments.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, these are historical monuments that date back to the 8th century when during Pallava rule, these were sculpted out of rocks. In fact, they're an example of the artistic skill and the artistry of artisans in this part of the world. Many of them very skilled sculptors, and they've carved out these rocks. The Arjuna's Penance, of course, basically depicting Arjuna standing on a leg and performing penance. So, as far as the Shore Temple is concerned, of course, it's a very intricate work of art, and in fact, it's as I said earlier, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's something that came to global attention when it was impacted by the tsunami in 2004. But thankfully, the damage done was not very severe. Although portions of the Shore Temple were affected, there have been excavations going on there since, and in fact, the tsunami did reveal some hidden portions of the temple that were unknown to archaeologists till then. So really, that is something that will be of great interest to the visiting Chinese dignitary, because as I said, Mamallapuram is one of those ancient shore towns that were that formed part of the trade route between India and China. In fact, remember in those days, trade was conducted largely by sea, and therefore we've had many well-known Chinese travelers, including Hu Sang, visiting Mamallapuram and recording it in his diary. So clearly, all of that is being factored into this particular visit, and that is one of the reasons why Mamallapuram was chosen, because of its historic connect with China. And clearly, it's a connect that resonates with the Indian side and with the Indian Prime Minister, who will be taking the visiting Chinese president around, showing him these rocks and showing him the sculptures that are on display. Before, of course, they adjourned for a dance performance by the seashore on the Bay of Bengal, where artists from the Kalakshetra Academy will be putting on a dance performance, a classical dance performance that will enthrall the visitors.
All right, Philip. Yes, these were about the monuments which will be visited by the dignitaries there. As we talk, we tell our viewers that this, in the visuals, this is the plane of the Chinese president, Air China, and in any while from now, the visiting Chinese president will deboard the plane, and we have a huge team of performers there, all ready, all set to give a glimpse of the cultural extravaganza to the visiting Chinese president. And as we speak, we tell our viewers that from here the Chinese president will depart and will arrive at the Hotel ITC Grand Chennai, and after that, from there he will be driven down to Mamallapuram. The Prime Minister will receive the visiting dignitary there. And as we've told you repeatedly, he will be given a guided tour by the Prime Minister. Arjuna's Penance, Krishna's Butterball Rock, Pancharath's Shore temples. We have been talking a lot about the issues which could be taken up between the two leaders. Remember, this is an informal summit, which means that no formal announcement or for that matter, no MOUs would be signed, but issues could be taken up which will be of bilateral, regional and global importance, and both the leaders will exchange views on deepening the India-China closer development partnership. Mamallapuram is famous for freestanding temples cut out of solid rocks, and most of which are located locally styled on raths or chariots. This is basically the theme of the temples there. The caves are beautiful there, excavated in hill scraps and used as temples. As we speak, we see the official there, part of the Chinese president's delegation, deboard the plane there, and in a while from now we see the Chinese president will deboard the plane at Chennai International Airport. We were talking of the temples, the term being used here to denote built-up masonry temples, and also sculpted steins are carved on the hill edges there in Mamallapuram. So beautiful town there on the east coast of Tamil Nadu, and the temples, the sculpted scenes there illustrate the styles of Pallava architecture and plastic art. Time and again, our guest and our correspondent present in Chennai have been talking of the historical importance of Mamallapuram and how this has been the venue that has been chosen for the second informal summit between Chinese President and Indian Prime Minister. The first happened in Wuhan in China in 2018, and we also gave you a detailed report of the takeaways from that meet and from that summit. Remember, India and China are the two countries which follow this format of informal summits between each other, and that indeed is important because talking of, as our guest put, for every country there are regional issues, there are bilateral issues, there are hard issues that have to be dealt with when we talk of the meetings with other nations. So our guest also pointed out the three categories here: the regional issues, the bilateral issues, and also the hard issues that are there between the two countries. But the crux of the meet here would be to focus on the culture between the two countries and how Mamallapuram has been chosen given the ancient importance, the historical importance of the town, and how the linkages of the Pallava dynasty and also how maritime trade took place between India and China during the time of their rule. And as we speak, we see again officials of the Chinese delegation deboard the plane there, and the Chinese president is expected to deboard the plane anytime from now, and we have the cultural performance there for welcoming the Chinese president at the Chennai International Airport.
PM to nahi hai.
And as we speak, we see Chinese president waving to the beautiful cultural performance, and as he deboards the plane there, the Chinese president Xi Jinping arrives in Chennai. He is at the Chennai International Airport for an informal summit with the Indian Prime Minister, which will take place at Mamallapuram, and he is received here by the dignitaries. And yes, as we speak, our correspondent Philip Matthews is joining us. Philip, let us know more about the welcome of the Chinese president there.
Well, Preeti, as I told you, the visiting Chinese president is being welcomed by his performances by a variety of folk artists. They will be showcasing 8 traditional art forms of Tamil Nadu, including its most famous export of Bharatanatyam. All of this will be on show today. And in fact, as you can see, the Chinese president being received by the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, by
Yes.
the Tamil Nadu Governor, and of course the visiting Chinese delegation, including of course China's ambassador in India and India's ambassador to China. So all of them present there at the airport to receive the visiting dignitary. The Chinese president will now move towards the motorcade. He will gradually, he will of course be given a glimpse of these art forms as he walks past and boards his car to leave for ITC Hotel Grand. And along the route, as I said, there will be at various points there will be groups of students standing there waving flags. In fact, we even have some performers here on stilts who are waving the Chinese flag just beside the plane. I don't know whether the camera has been able to capture that, but it's something. It's a very, very colorful sight watching these performers on stilts waving the Chinese flag in welcoming the Chinese president. Now, as you can hear the sound of the drum
Yes.
being played as the Chinese president gradually moves towards his vehicle, and that of course is as I said, one of the vibrant art forms of Tamil Nadu. These drums and percussion instruments that have been played. This of course showcases Tamil Nadu's very rich and ancient history and culture. All of that is on evidence at the moment. Clearly, the idea is to give the visiting Chinese dignitary a taste of what Tamil Nadu's culture is like. And the idea clearly is to convey that Tamil Nadu has a culture that's as ancient as perhaps Chinese civilization is, if not more. So clearly, that's the message that's being sought to be sent out by the Indian and Tamil Nadu governments. And it's quite clear that the Chinese visitors have been enthralled by what they have seen. In fact, I'm speaking from some of these members of the Chinese delegation, and all of them were extremely fascinated to see the performers, the costumes that they were wearing, and the kind of instruments that they were playing. All
Right.
of them extremely enthusiastic about it, and something that they had not seen before. And clearly, they were hoping that to impress the visiting country significantly with the performance that they will carry with them to take out back home.
Yes, Philip, when we talk of the historical importance of Mamallapuram, China had trade relations with Kanchi in the 2nd century. The Chinese traveler of the 7th century, that is Xianzang, for that matter, visited Kanchi, the capital of the Pallavas, and that was the period when the relationship between China and India could be traced back, and that he visited Kanchi and left us with an interesting and vivid account of the capital. We know the ports of Tamil Nadu at that time were the entry points for the ships coming from China, and that would bring us to the point where the Pallavas and the Chola kingdom had strong maritime trade connections with the Chinese. And not just this, Philip, we would also know that the evidence of this relationship, this historical and this age-old relationship also comes from the idea that the Chinese porcelain from the coastal sites of Tamil Nadu indeed prove the well-established trade contacts between India and China of those times, isn't it?
I'm sorry, Preeti, I'm not able to hear you in the huge thing going on in the background. I'm not quite able to catch what you said.
Yes, Philip, we were talking about the historical relations between India and China and how Mamallapuram is the venue chosen for this informal summit. And as we speak, we see the Chinese president take account of the performances which have been arranged for ahead of his arrival at the Chennai International Airport. And from here, we see the Chinese president board the motorcade, and from here he will be taken for the hotel where he will be there for a short stay, and after that he will be driven down to Mamallapuram, where he will reach today evening. Prime Minister will receive him there. We already know that Prime Minister had reached Chennai in the afternoon today, and he there awaits the arrival of Chinese President in Mamallapuram, and the informal summit between the two leaders will begin today. This is a two-day summit. Today will be the cultural aspect of the summit which will be highlighted. The Prime Minister will, the visiting Chinese dignitary in fact will be given a guided tour of 3 important monuments in Mamallapuram: Arjuna's Penance and Krishna's Butterball Rock, Panchrats and Shore Temple. It will be tomorrow when the 2 leaders will sit for business talks. Delegation level talks are expected, though the foreign ministries of both the countries have not outlined specific areas which could be taken up, but they did put up, and I quote them, they say discussions on overarching issues of bilateral, regional and global importance would be taken up, and to exchange views on deepening India-China closer development partnership. This is in extension to Prime Minister's visit to Wuhan last year in 2018, where the first informal summit was held. And remember, India and China, as we told you earlier, are the 2 countries in the world which have this setup of informal summits between them. And this was initiated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And as our guest put that, this also provides an opportunities for both the countries to build up and to take forward the issues and the aspects of the relationship which are important to both of them. At this point, I will bring in our guest. We are joined in by Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, and we have been talking about different aspects of the relationship. Sir, at one point in the discussion, you talked of how China had a peaceful rise and how it ended up being a part of the G2. And now when we talk about that in the present context, we see that there is this America First initiative or like atmosphere which has been created by President Trump. And also you wait for us how important is China as a partner for India, and how it has it has, from a developing country, it has positioned itself to one of the major powers of the world. So how crucial is that? Because the magnitude of China's rise is such that, put in simple words for the common person like me and our viewers to understand, it would not be very important and it would not be a binding aspect for China to please, every country in the region, or to take along every country in the region. So when we talk of that, how do you see, because India on the other hand is also making its presence felt not only here, but in the international arena as well, not only in our region itself, but also in the West. So put all these points together, do we see some sort of permutations or combinations between the 2 change when they meet for the summit?
Absolutely. China is our northern neighbor. And as they say, you cannot change geography, you cannot change your neighbors. We have a 4,000 kilometer long border with China, which is not just not demarcated, undemarcated, is undelineated, in the sense that there is lack of clarity as to what should be a prospective boundary or line between the 2 countries. And it's a difficult terrain. And China has risen remarkably. It's one of the greatest stories of success, of a rise, of acquiring military muscle, economic muscle, and with that has come ambition. You are absolutely right. Parallel to that is the rise of India, maybe not to that magnitude, but with one very big difference. China is a totalitarian regime. India is a democracy, and for a democracy to rise in a non-threatening fashion and becoming a factor in peace, stability and growth in the world, which India is a major thing. Within the next 7 years, 5 years to 7 years, will be a $5 trillion economy. By mid-30s, we will be a $10 trillion economy. Hopefully by 2040 or so, or even before, will be among the 3 largest economies in the world. So that is the kind of growth trajectory that India is on. And today India is leveraging its relations with every country. I'm happy to say, as a former diplomat, that there is practically no country in the world which does not want to engage India. And India is seen as a benign power because we are an open society. So that is the difference between the 2 countries. But to a very valid question about how important China is for India, China is indeed very important for India. We are in the same geography. it is in our interest and hopefully China's interest to find a modus vivendi. Because as two large countries, two important countries, we need to work together.
And even as we speak, we see the motorcade of the Chinese president there. He has left Chennai airport, and you see their school children with India and China flags welcoming the Chinese president. The Chinese president has arrived and he is on his way to the hotel. And after a brief stopover there, he will be driven down to Mamallapuram, where he will be received by Prime Minister and for the informal summit between the two leaders. And for our viewers who joined in, this is a special telecast, special program wherein we are talking of the informal summit between India and China that will be taking place in Mamallapuram. And Chinese president has arrived a little while back at the Chennai International Airport, and he will drive down to Mamallapuram today evening. We're joined in with our guest in the studio, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash ji is here. Ambassador, we were talking of how China and India together are crucial for each other. Both put together, they constitute 35% of the world population and also 45% of global growth. So, robust relationship between both of them would be the anchor for regional stability, paving the way for a more integrated, prosperous Asian community. And when these two leaders meet, what is it for the world to look for?
Well, there's a lot to look forward to, look closely to. One, certainly the bilateral aspect, but also there are two spectrums, two ends of the spectrum. One, imagine if India and China were to work together. You very rightly spoke about numbers of the what percentage of the world GDP we constitute, what percentage of the world population we constitute. And let me take you back to the 19th century, where India and China constituted more than 50% of the global GDP. That was the 19th century, and when we talk of India, we talk of re-emergence of India. So India is re-emerging, India is very rapidly moving towards attaining its destiny. If China and India work together, I think we can provide leadership to the world. I think we can become the twin engines of growth in the world. I think we can provide stability to the world. So that is if we work together. I don't want to look at the opposite side of it. I remain eternally optimistic, but one is cautiously optimistic because, as we discussed earlier, it's a difficult relationship. China has unfortunately today only two friends, and that shows the attitude of China. One is a country called Pakistan, one is a country called North Korea. And both are states which do not have much to write home about. Now, if a person is known by the company he keeps, I think that itself shows. And also look at what China is doing. They have militarized the South China Sea. They have sown discord, seeds of discord in the ASEAN region. There is a leadership tussle between USA and China. They have invested hundreds of billions of dollars in Belt Road Initiative, basically for two objectives. One, because they have huge capacities to manage to sell their goods and services, and also to acquire global assets. They are very keen to acquire strategic ports the world over. So that is the difference between India and China. But that said, again, I feel that it's in common interest for both the countries to find a modus vivendi, because together we can make a difference, and an antagonistic relationship between the two countries, I think, does not serve the interest of either of the countries.
All right, we were talking about the areas of cooperation and how different areas have to be dealt with between the two countries. When we talk of economy, connectivity, culture and tourism, environment protection could be an area where both the countries could work together, in the sense that we have shared atmospheres, we have got water resources, Himalayan ecology is shared between both of us. Together we can promote solutions that would tackle the issue of climate change and sustainable development.
Well, very much. And in the between the period of 2005 to 2010, we were in fact coordinating positions. But again, this challenge is as under. India's per capita income is $2,000. Chinese per capita income is already $10,000. They have moved much ahead. And there our interests both diverge and converge. Now, look, let's talk of climate change. First of all, I completely agree that in our world, you cannot have enclaves of greenery or have enclaves with a better climate. I mean, we all swim and sink together. But India and China are two countries which have yet to grow, yet to develop. So, our carbon footprint is going to grow. But the challenge today is that the world, the developed countries are not meeting their part of the bargain, because the whole basis of the climate change talks discussions were that polluter pays, that the developed countries will contribute to green technologies and will help the developing countries to increase carbon energy efficiency, reduce carbon intensity or energy intensity, but that is not happening. So, therefore, again you are right, China and India together can collaborate and bring about share green technology, share best practices, and it will help each other. The need is of the requisite will on both sides. The need is for both sides to kind of learn to gradually to work with each other, trust each other. So, that is the challenge, and let me close by mentioning that if you see any statement by our Chinese friends, there are a lot of homilies, there are lots of good words, but we have to learn to walk the talk. And that is the important challenge for both the countries.
All right, walking the talk is what is the need of the hour, as you put it. That brings me to RCEP. China has to bring in efforts, has to rather double the efforts to accommodate the interests not only of India but other partners as well.
Yes, very much. But again, let me be frank, we have a challenge. The Asian tigers, that is the ASEAN countries, are already an economic unit. They have gone up they have gone higher in the value chain. They have industrialized. Who are the other 6 countries?
ASEAN plus 16 is how we put it.
Precisely.
So, like, how important would they be as a team when we talk of China doubling its efforts to change RCEP?
Well, I have a slight difference of opinion with you here, and that is that we also need to carry our weight.
Okay.
Today the challenge, unfortunately, is that we are the least industrialized country amongst the 16 RCEP countries. And when we talk of Make in India mission, which Prime Minister Modi has outlined for the country, the idea is to increase the percentage of manufacturing from 16% of our GDP or 15% to 26%. So, that is our challenge, but we are making progress very slowly. So, we have to protect our markets, and that is where we need understanding from other countries, especially China, because we do not want Chinese goods to flood the Indian markets. But at the same time, we cannot expect a protective wall for a very long time. So, we need to do our bit, and we expect other countries to do their bit. So, that is where we are moving forward, and what I read recently was that Government of India is going to prescribe standards, quality standards for goods which are being imported into the country, so that substandard goods do not come in, or goods which are where our small and medium industries get affected do not come in. So, I guess all sides will have to do their bit to take the process forward.
All right, as we speak, we just showed the visuals. The Chinese president has reached the hotel for a brief stopover. ITC Grand Chennai, he is the place where he is. He will be making a brief stopover, and from there, after some while, he will head towards Mamallapuram. And earlier we talked of the historical significance of the coastal town of Mamallapuram. and also the guided tour which the Prime Minister will be giving to the visiting dignitary. And also, as we've told you, tomorrow will be the day of business for both the leaders. Today, it will more or less be a cultural extravaganza which the Chinese President will witness in Mamallapuram. And Arjuna's Penance and Krishna's Butterball Rock, Panchraths, Shore Temple, these will be the monuments which will be visiting, which the Chinese President will be visiting. And after that, a cultural program is planned at the Shore Temple in Mamallapuram. The most famous is the Shore Temple of Mamallapuram. For the benefit of our viewers, let us tell them that it was worst hit during the 2004 tsunami. However, the beautiful and the strong structure survived this catastrophe, and the damage was the least to its structure and beauty at that time. As we talk of the tsunami in 2014, the waves heaped the sea and sea sand on the temple, and later when the sand was uncovered, a few more sculptures that were hidden in the sand before the tsunami was discovered. And apart from this, the Chinese President will also visit Arjuna's Penance. Arjuna's Penance, or Descent of Ganga, is the name of this monument in Mamallapuram. And Panchraths will also be a place which will be visited by the Chinese President there. Translating as the 5 chariots, Panchraths means 5 chariots, and they are rock-cut temples, and each of them are carved out from a single rock. That is what makes them interesting. As we speak, our correspondent Amrit Pal is joining us. Amrit, the Chinese President has arrived in Chennai, and he is at the hotel for a brief stopover, and in the evening he will reach Mamallapuram, where he will be received by the Prime Minister. Let's talk more about the program that awaits the Chinese President in the evening. Amrit, if I'm audible to you, let us know more about the program that awaits the Chinese President in Mamallapuram in the evening. As we speak, we've told our viewers that the Chinese President is making a brief stopover at a hotel in Chennai, and then he will drive down to Mamallapuram, and he will be received by the Prime Minister in the evening. Let us know more about the program that awaits the Chinese President there in Mamallapuram.
That's right, Preeti. You're right that the visiting dignitary has arrived along with his 90-member delegation, and he's right now staying at the Chola Hotel in Chennai, where he's going to put up. Then he drives down 55 kilometer drive from Chennai, and along the whole route there are about 34 places where cultural performances will be put up by various cultural groups. Children, local residents are out there lined up on these roads to catch a glimpse of the visiting dignitary. We expect about 350 odd performers, and along the route from where he's coming down to the Eastern Coast Expressway, the Eastern Coast Road, East Coast Road as it's known, and then he arrives here in Mamallapuram at 5 in the evening, where he shall be received by Prime Minister Modi at the Krishna's Butterball, that UNESCO World Heritage Site rock. And then there, the Prime Minister will receive him. The two leaders will take a short walk to the urgent penance. The two leaders will talk about, while take this walk to the Arjuna's penance, they could, have an informal discussion, and they could touch upon issues of mutual and interest, bilateral relations, global importance. Then the Prime Minister and the visiting President will drive down to the Panchraths, which is another World Heritage Site dating back to the 7th century AD. From there, they go down to the Shore Temple, where a cultural evening is organized, and after that, the Prime Minister hosts a dinner for President Xi and his delegation. We expect about 16 people. That's 8 plus 1. 8 people from the Chinese side, 8 people from the Indian side. They'll basically be high-ranking officials accompanying the visiting president and also their counterparts and high-level officials from India. Mainly, if I can tell you who all are accompanying the president, it's a 90-member delegation, as I said, but the most important people in the president's entourage are Deng Xuesheng. He's a member of the Politburo and of the Central Committee and a member of the Central Secretariat of the CPC Central Committee, and he's also the Director General of the Office of the CPC Central Committee. He's a very, very important and a senior leader in the party position there in the Communist Party. Mr. Yang Jiechi, former Foreign Minister, former now member of the Politburo, and he's also, most importantly, the Director of the Office of Foreign Affairs. So he's a significant voice in terms of shaping foreign policy of China. Of course, the Foreign Minister and State Councillor Wang Yi, and also He Lanfeng. He's the Vice Chairman of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the Chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission. Now, these are the main people. So we'll have from the Indian side, we will have the National Security Advisor, the External Affairs Minister. There at the dinner, of course, the Foreign Secretary and senior officials of the Ministry of External Affairs there while at the dinner. And after the dinner, they spent about close to about 3 hours together today. And then President Xi drives back to Chennai, where he stays put. So that's what the program today is.
All right. So, Amrit, the gist would be that today it will be a cultural extravaganza which awaits the Chinese president
Also, Preeti,
yes,
elaborate Tamil cuisine will be laid out, both veg and non-veg. We can expect chicken, we can expect delicacies like idli, dosa, sambar, the elaborate Tamil cuisine. So that will be there for the Chinese dignitaries to taste today.
All right, Amrit, you're talking in detail about the cultural extravaganza that awaits the Chinese president. Now, you've been covering external affairs for like the longest time, I know. Let's talk more about the scope and the potential of such informal summits. India and China are the two countries which, on the initiation of Prime Minister Modi, have met earlier also last year for an informal summit, and this is the second informal summit. Now let's talk of the cultural aspect added to this. Business level talks, delegation level talks are expected, though both the foreign officers have said that no MOU would be signed. So put all this together, how do you weigh the importance and the significance of the informal summits between India and China?
Well, this is designed to be informal for the simple reason that we know both countries have outstanding issues. Be it we don't have we have differences on the border. We have differences in terms of how China looks at terror. We've known how they, for a very long time, vetoed the listing of Masood Azhar, and it was only after Pulwama and much nudging by India and other foreign powers that they finally agreed to allow Masood Azhar to be listed. We have a lot of differences with China. Now, what the Prime Minister is trying to essentially do is that he's trying to create a setting where the two leaders can have a freewheeling chat. And the first part of it is what happened at Wuhan, which was something very new for India. India has never done this before, and also for the Chinese, given that they have a very strictly controlled political system there. So for the Chinese president also, when it first time happened in Wuhan, it was a big step. So the idea was to create an informal setting, set the mood, and then reach out to each other, try and build trust, and then see what all can be gained and what all can the two sides agree on. Now, when you have such a difficult relationship, when you have issues which seemingly are intractable, and if such a soft approach is adopted, what happens is sometimes what is called as the human agency plays out. The persona of the leaders can affect the outcome of such talks. We've seen that happening not very often, really, but yes, we've seen this happen in world history, where leaders have used their own political personality, their own personality trait, their own style, and also the human agency to affect the outcomes, because nations decide on national interests and not on two individuals getting together. But yes, when the individuals are heads of state or heads of government, they do cast a considerable influence on the outcome of various negotiations or engagements that may happen. So this is what was later called as the Wuhan spirit. Now, what at Mamallapuram the two leaders would be trying to do is, again, work on those lines. Now, these are, at that time, Wuhan was happening post-Doklam, so the focus really was how to avoid face-offs, how to avoid any military confrontations. So we saw the outcome being the two leaders agreeing to give strategic military advice and directions to their respective armies, and we saw the results of that. Now, this comes in the wake of China, raising the Kashmir issue on behalf of Pakistan. Now, as important developments like the FATF happening the next very day from 13th to 18th, the Paris summit happens. So these things are expected to figure. The Indians are not going to bring it up, but if the Chinese bring up the issue of Kashmir, the Indians could put out what their thinking is, what their rationale was behind abrogation of 370, and much expected on the lines of what Dr. Jaishankar told his counterpart Wang Yi in September, that those three principles of one, India has not changed any territory that existed. Secondly, it's a sovereign right. That means, which basically means an internal issue of India. And thirdly, India has extraterritorial ambitions. It does not require any other territory. So it will try and soothe the frayed nerves of China when it comes to Kashmir, if China raises this issue up with India. And it does try and explain the reason for the rationale, the reason is the decision to abrogate 35A and abrogate parts of 370. Now, as far as the other issues go, like trade deficit, how to handle, how to upgrade the CBM, and things like that, all that will figure in the talks. People-to-people contact will figure in the talks, but the idea behind all this, that it's happening in a place out of Delhi, out of the formal settings of, say, Hyderabad House, where both leaders spend about total of today and tomorrow 6 hours together, and in a more relaxed, in a more informal environment, is to explore the possibilities or snatch those moments where they can give a push to this process of strengthening the ties and building on the ties, taking them to greater heights. Preeti?
We'll take this thought forward, but you be with us. We'll come back to you again. But at present, we'll tell our viewers about the significance of choosing this venue. Up next, we decode why Mamallapuram has been chosen as the venue for the second informal summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. Mamallapuram is also known as Mahabalipuram. The name is said to have been derived from the word Mamallan, which means great warrior. That is a reference to King Narasimhavarman, a Pallav dynast who took forward India-China ties in the 6th century AD. Take a look.
Taking a step forward to strengthen the ancient ties between India and China, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in Mamallapuram for an informal summit. Mamallapuram has been a witness to the 1700-year-old ties of these two ancient civilizations. The city is world famous for ancient temple architecture. According to historians, this capital city of the Pallava kingdom is important in terms of trade. Ancient Chinese, Persian and Roman coins dating back to the 7th century were found here, indicating its existence as a seaport. Historians believe that during the 6th and 7th centuries, a Chinese traveller, Huan Sang, visited India and received a grand welcome by the Pallava king. Mahendravarman during this period. It is said that the Chinese were well versed with the city and frequently visited it for trade. Mahendravarman's son, Narasimhavarman, played a vital role in expanding trade ties with China and even sent his ambassadors there. It is believed that the Chinese had close connections with Kanchipuram as it was a pilgrimage for them during that period. India and China not only had trade relations but also share a deep spiritual connection. Historians believe that the Buddhist monk Bodhidharma was related to the Pallavas. Born in India, he travelled to China in 526 AD, taking the religious philosophy with him. He travelled via the sea route and established the practice of meditation there.
Historically, if you look at the flow of Buddhism, it happens from India to the Chinese, and subsequently, of course, the form of Buddhism that's practiced in China has a lot of other influences, the Zen form of Buddhism. And the interesting thing is that even as the Chinese were also making some kind of maritime outreach towards Southeast Asia, and even as India was making cultural trade outreach to those regions, we never had these instances of India and China getting into warlike situations.
This is not the first time that Prime Minister Modi is hosting a foreign leader outside the national capital. He had hosted President Xi in Ahmedabad in 2014. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also stayed at Ahmedabad during his India visit. Similarly, French President Emmanuel Macron experienced Indian culture on the ghats of the river Ganga at Varanasi, giving the world leaders a glimpse of incredible India. Interestingly, when the Prime Minister went to China for the first time, President Xi hosted him in Xi'an, his hometown, instead of Beijing. Bureau Report, DD News.
Alright, so that was the significance of the venue. Mamallapuram has been chosen as the venue, and as put by our special report and as put in by our correspondents, the historical significance of the coastal town has been put forth for our viewers. We are also joined in with a guest in the studio. Ambassador Vishnu Prakashji is with us to talk more about the visit, the informal visit, the second visit between India and China that is will begin in a short while from now. In the evening today, in the coastal town of Mamallapuram, the Chinese president has arrived in Chennai, and he is there in Chennai for a brief stopover at a hotel, and then he will be driven down to Mamallapuram. Sir, going back to the talk we've had all this while about the relationship between the two countries, let's talk about the leadership of the Prime Minister. In 2014 till now, the second tenure of the Prime Minister, we know how the Indian image is being put forth on the global page, and as you also put, there is no country in the world which does not want to engage in India. Initiating informal summits with China, and we also saw his participation at the UNGA recently, and we've seen continuous efforts being put by the Indian dispensation to put India on the global page. Does that also somewhere have a bearing on how the world looks at India now?
Very much so. It certainly it's a totality of things which matter for the image of a country. Prime Minister Modi's advent on the scene has basically lifted India's stock, I can tell you firsthand. And permit me to share a small anecdote with you. When Prime Minister Modi visited Canada in April 2015, it was the first prime ministerial visit from India to Canada in 42 years. And I had the privilege of being the High Commissioner of India to Canada. Prime Minister Modi was addressing a packed hall of 10,000 people at Toronto. And next to me was the CEO of Brookfield, which is the biggest investor in India in real estate. It's a $260 billion company. That's the size of Brookfield. And Prime Minister Modi was speaking in Hindi, but such was the electricity in the atmosphere that he turned to me and said, High Commissioner, I don't know what your Prime Minister is saying because he's speaking in Hindi, but listen, whatever he's selling, I'm going to buy. It was remarkable, the energy that he brings to the table, the effort that he makes, the kind of initiatives that have been unfolded, whether in the social sector, whether in the economic sector, it is remarkable. And the world takes note of that. world takes note of the fact that he has come back, he has led his party back to power with a 6% increase in the electoral share, in the vote share. So, and then the way the relationships have been developed with practically every country. I mean, look at the relationship with Japan or Australia or ASEAN, or with the Arab countries, especially Saudi Arabia and UAE. Look at the relationship with France, Germany. I look at the fact that it was the first time ever that a serving American president came to India twice. I am referring to Obama's visit. So, on practically every yardstick, the leadership being provided by Prime Minister Modi has made a very big difference. And I have never seen in my, I was a diplomat for more than 35 years. I have never seen India's stock being so high as it is at present.
Yes, even as we speak, the Chinese president has arrived. We've told our viewers, and he is being a large, he is accompanied with a large delegation there, and we have Ambassador Vishnu Prakash ji joining us from in the studio to talk more about the relationship and also the expectations from this second informal visit between India and China. Also, we had inputs coming in from our correspondents who are there in Chennai and also in Mamallapuram, and in the evening the program will begin. Sir, very quickly, as closing comments, we've talked of the expectations, we've talked of the areas of cooperation, and also how we've talked how both the countries are important for each other. But then put all this together, we saw this positivity in Wuhan also, but then at the end of the day we see the recent developments, the recent developments where we saw China siding with our neighbor, and also the Chinese president from here, he will go to Nepal, and the stopover of the Chinese president here in India. Put all this together, this summit, took forward the points of the Wuhan spirit, and a lot of positivity, lot of optimism carrying over from Wuhan spirit. That would indeed take the relationship between the two countries in the longer run, the positivity that will further strengthen the relationship in the longer run.
Hopefully.
Given the fact that it is an informal summit, though delegation level talks will take place tomorrow, the leaders will sit for business tomorrow, but then again, closing comments on the expectations.
Sure, hopefully.
Hopefully.
As they say in English, from your lips to God's ears. I mean, I hope it works. India and China, as we see it, are two engines of growth in Asia and beyond. Together, it's a win-win proposition. And I think it will be of interest, just as we would like to have better coordination, collaboration with China. I do hope that Chinese also see reason for that and re-look at their relationship with countries which are out to disturb peace and equanimity in this region. It's very easy to talk to friends. The challenge is to talk to adversaries, and we have to stay the course. It's a relationship which goes back 2,000 years. We will have to keep discussing and hopefully find some meeting ground in trying to move forward on the difficult issues, and certainly build on the other issues, so that we can have a better understanding with each other.
All right, sir. We'll end this conversation here on this note of positivity. But before we take your leave for the viewers, let's put in an interesting fact which has been just sent by our correspondent who's there in Chennai and Mamallapuram. President Xi Jinping, as we told you, is accompanied with a large delegation, and he will get a taste of India. Now, this is the theme of the cuisine there. We also tell you that the choice of the venue, that is Mamallapuram, was the take of Prime Minister Modi. He chose the venue as Mamallapuram, and President Xi Jinping will get a taste of India with a special focus on South Indian delicacies tonight. Remember, cultural aspect, cultural extravaganza will be what the Chinese President Xi Jinping will get a taste of today evening, and it will be tomorrow when the two leaders will sit for business. Delegation level talks will happen tomorrow at a special dinner hosted by Prime Minister Modi in the honor of Chinese President in Mamallapuram this evening. The choicest of Indian culinary delights will be on display. The special focus of the evening will be to showcase the diverse cuisines of South India. Also, the Prime Minister will give a guided tour to the Chinese President of the beautiful monuments in the coastal town of Mamallapuram. These are the UNESCO heritage sites. Also, very quickly, I'll give you a look into the cuisine that will be served to the visiting dignitary, from Thakali Rasam to Archavitto Sambar, from Kadalai Kurumu to Kava Narsi Halwa. Lots there to welcome the Chinese President. The menu on offer will reflect the sweeping diversity of the South Indian culinary traditions, from Chettinad to Karaikuri. All regional cuisines will be represented at the Chinese President's table today evening. All right, on that thought and this positivity and optimism, we'll end this special show here, the Mamallapuram Summit. We'll keep you updated. Remember, at present, the Chinese President is in ITC Hotel in Chennai, and in some while from now, he will embark on a road trip. He will be driven down to Mamallapuram, where the Prime Minister will receive him, and the informal summit between the two leaders will begin today evening. That's it. As of now, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bravo.